Teacher, I don't feel comfortable. Why don't you feel comfortable, student? I don't feel comfortable because people laugh at me when I speak English. Don't like the way I look. I don't feel comfortable. I don't feel like an American. Has a student ever come to you as a teacher and talk to you maybe privately or even in a classroom setting where they're feeling a bit left out? Not so much left out in the class, but just left out in general, simply because of who they are or what they look like. We're talking about discrimination. How do you handle that? What do you tell your students? Stay tuned. Hey everyone, it's Dara. So this video is going to be a little controversial because we're going to talk about discrimination. Now, discrimination basically means when someone dislikes you or is prejudiced against you simply because of who you are. Now, when I say who you are, this can range in many ways. We may be talking about nationality, the color of your skin, your weight. It could be your gender, it could be your hair, it could be your language, it could be your culture, religion, sexuality, you name it. You name it. Discrimination is something that really hits home. Let's face it, discrimination is something we all face. It doesn't matter who you are or where you're from. There's something that unfortunately we all have to deal with, and it does hurt. And let me just say this as a disclaimer right now, that everyone's experiences and feelings towards discrimination will vary. I have met people who have been discriminated against who told me, hey, I don't care. I know who I am, and that's all that matters. And then you have people like myself who really dislike it very much. If you're that person who really dislikes discrimination, gets angry, feels hurt, feels sad, you're not alone. Now, I should also note that when I say sexuality, this is another controversial topic because there are people even to this day who don't acknowledge sexuality as a discriminating factor. And what I mean by this are people who are either straight or gay or bisexual or transgender. And there are many differences between all of these different things. I am a straight woman, meaning that I am not part of the gay community, so I can't really speak too in depth about that. But I will say that there are cultures out there, there are countries in existence that still do not accept people's sexuality. So if you're a person who falls under the lesbian, gay, transgender, bisexual category, then just know that this is something that unfortunately you may in fact face, and it's just unfortunate. As an ESL student, and because you are an adult, okay, this is something that may in fact come up in the ESL classroom. It doesn't have to be purposeful, but you never know who your classmates are going to be. You don't know how people are going to feel, so sometimes that may in fact come up in discussion. Discrimination doesn't have to just be about sexuality. It could be in the way you look. Now, when I say the way you look, let me talk about women first, and I'll talk about men second, because there is a discrepancy and there are differences between the two. Now, as a woman, a lot of times, depending on the culture you're from, women are usually very small figured. They might be tall, they might be considered beautiful if they have long hair, or maybe if they have a fairer skin tone, etc. However, if you don't look like that, that could be a discriminating factor. Also, depending on how a woman is dressed, plays a big part in that too. The other thing is weight. Now, weight is a huge issue, whether you're a man or a woman. So if you are considered fat, and I actually did a video about this not too long ago, teacher, why are you so fat? So-and-so said, teacher, and she kept pointing to my stomach, and I just smiled at her, and she said, why are you so fat? So at this point, I said, if I don't answer her question, she's going to keep asking me. I turned it into a lesson. That automatically can be a discriminating factor. Now for men, same principle. If a man, say, is considered fat, he may go through the same thing. It could be maybe the way he looks, it could be his height, it could be maybe his personality. So Discrimination really doesn't limit itself. It's pretty much anything that a person or people may not like about you just because you are you. The purpose of this video, I want to address it within the ESL community, specifically with students. Now, if you work with adult students, again, don't be surprised, you may even see this happening in your classroom. I personally have seen students discriminate each other based on where they're from, the way they speak, the way they look, etc. Religion also plays a part in this too, especially if you're someone, for example, who's part of the Muslim faith. If you're part of the Muslim faith and maybe you dress in the hijab, some students may not like that very much. Or if you're a Christian, like in my case, as you can see, I'll come to the camera. Okay, so I wear this symbolizing my Christian faith. Again, you might have some students who may not like that very much. One advice to teachers I would say is that if you're seeing discrimination happening in your classroom, I would recommend you to try to tone that down a little bit. Now, you cannot change people's attitudes, and no, you don't have to necessarily try to change people's attitudes, but you want to make sure that it doesn't get out of hand, because it can and it will, and I have experienced this firsthand, and it's not pretty. So you want to be very careful with that. You want to encourage your students not to be so open with their prejudices. Although they have the right to feel how they feel, and we cannot tell them how they should feel, but we also want to remind them that because this is an ESL classroom, because we are in a professional environment, we must be careful in the commentary on the things that are being said in the classroom. And if it's something controversial or prejudicial, it's not such a good idea to be extremely open about that. Now, you as an ESL student, this is where it becomes more difficult, because the teacher does have the right to intervene, or he or she may decide not to intervene. And if you're finding yourself in the class or even outside the class, and your classmate or classmates may in fact say and do things that is very discriminating. For example, let's say you come into a class and the teacher wants you to do pair work, and the person next to you is literally pulling away from you, or get up and move his or her seat to somewhere else, or does not want to share their textbook with you. The discriminating factor in that may not be because, oh, the student is shy or the student doesn't feel comfortable. It could be the fact strictly because of who you are. He or she might be even bold enough to say things like, I don't want to work with you because you are a, or because you look like a, or because you two such and such. And it's unfortunate, but it does happen. I also had students who had learning disabilities or developmental disabilities, where maybe their physical features looked a little different from the rest of the students, and maybe they weren't able to keep up in the class like everyone else. And there were times where students will actually say to me in the middle of class, I don't want to work with her because she's stupid, or I don't want to work with him because he's slow. And it's horrible, but it happens. So what do? You're the ESL student, you're feeling like you're being discriminated against. Here's my advice to you. The first thing you want to do is, if you don't want to address that particular student, you want to inform your teacher, because as teachers we can in fact intervene and talk to that student on your behalf. If you feel more comfortable handling it on your own, then my suggestion is to let that student know that you do not feel comfortable by his or her comments. If that student becomes combative, meaning they feel a little argumentative and they say, hey, I can say what I want, fine, but let that student know that you are entitled to your opinion, but I don't feel comfortable. Please do not say this to me. If it ever gets to a point where you're doing that and the student is just like, I don't care what you're saying, I'm not listening to you, this is where you should let your teacher know, and he or she could in fact intervene. You approach your teacher, and your teacher might try to intervene, and that student says, I don't care what you say because I don't like you either. So this can in fact happen. My best advice to you is you let your teacher know, you speak your truth, you let the student know, I don't feel comfortable. If things get too, I like to say, too much, then the teacher can in fact maybe separate you in the classroom, or possibly if that student is becoming so disrespectful where it's disruptive in the class, they could ask their student to leave. So there are protocols involved. Sometimes the agency will have its own protocol where students will be informed by, say, a supervisor or a coordinator to let him or her know that they cannot behave in such manner. How do I handle people not liking me when I leave school? Because that will happen. Let me give you the best example. I live in New York City, so majority of my experience have been, in fact, here in New York City. If you know anything about New York City, we are like considered the melting pot, meaning that we have cultures from all over the world living here. So one might be kind of confused if I say that we do have prejudices and racism here in New York City, right? Interesting, but it's true. We cannot control people's feelings, we cannot control people's thoughts, and yes, prejudices, discrimination, racism, all of these things do exist no matter where you live. So, your student is having a great time learning English, he or she is maybe making friends with their classmates, they like the teacher, everything is fine. They leave their class, they go outside, maybe they go to their local cafe, and someone just do this to them. Or they suck their teeth at them. Or if they go to a store and let's say they're going to make a purchase and maybe the person who's receiving the money snatches the money or grabs the money from them in an aggressive way, or they might yell at them, "How may I help you? What do you want?" You know, they come off a little more aggressive. This will happen. Again, if you live in a place like New York City, we're considered the hustle and bustle city, meaning we're always in a rush, there's always a lot of people, and people don't always say excuse me, so sometimes you will get bumped, okay? But there's a difference between someone bumping you by mistake and someone bumping you on purpose. Sadly, a lot of my students have shared stories with me where that has in fact happened to them. My advice to you as an ESL student is, if you're finding yourself in a situation like this, the best thing to do is to ignore it. Now that is going to be difficult because we're all human and nobody likes to be disrespected. But you don't want to find yourself, you know, doing this and getting mad and saying bad words, because unfortunately we live in a society where people don't always want to fight you with their fist, and you want to protect your life and your safety. Your safety is most important. So it's better not to, I should say it's best not to get into a fight with a stranger. Let them say what they want. Just ignore them and walk away. The best thing to remember, whether you are learning English, whether you are a foreigner in a new country, or you're born and raised American like myself, discrimination will happen no matter what. And sometimes it just doesn't make sense. The best thing to do is to ignore it. The best thing to do is, if you feel like you want to express yourself, do it in a very professional and respectful manner. But if that person is being disrespectful and trying to argue with you, walk away. Don't give them that much of your attention. They're not worth it. And when it comes to inside the ESL classroom, discrimination should not be tolerated. And I'm happy to say that the places I've worked at, that is something that has been said to staff as well as to students. So when people come into that agency, they know they cannot be discriminatory against their teacher or to each other. Continue being who you are. Keep your head up. Stand tall. And as always, I'll see you in the next video.